Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Recently, we have made several videos depicting the tragic mysteries that surround people who have disappeared and have never been seen again. Today, we will be going over a very different kind of mystery. The case that we will be covering today is of a confirmed death that has some extremely odd circumstances surrounding it. Today's mystery will take us to San Francisco in California of the United States, as we take a look at a gruesome mystery that has ties to the occult. With that being said, let's get into it. Leroy Carter Jr. was born in Louisiana on September 17, 1951. Not much is known about the life of Carter as a child and teenager. The first confirmed fact about Leroy is that he served in the United States military during the Vietnam War. Carter was like thousands of other veterans coming home from Vietnam, trying to find his place in a world that was quickly changing. Much like other veterans, as well, Leroy seemed to have been suffering from mental trauma that came with fighting in the brutal conflict. Tragically, mental health was not an issue that the military or the government provided services for when troops came home from Vietnam. Leroy Carter Jr. found himself trying to get on his feet while fighting trauma suffered from his time in the military. His issues were only compounded by the economic slump that America found itself in during the 1970s. Due to the combination of several issues, Carter found himself homeless on the streets of San Francisco. The beautiful Golden Gate Park had become run down during those years. The park was overrun with a heroin epidemic, along with a large homeless population. On any given day, the park could have over 200 homeless residents. Leroy Carter Jr. was one of the homeless individuals that sought refuge in Golden Gate Park early in the year of 1981. On the evening of February 7th of that year, Leroy found himself looking for a secluded and calm area that he could unroll his sleeping bag for the night and catch some sleep. He found a peaceful spot on the eastern edge of the park beside the small body of water called Alvord Lake. It was here that Carter made camp for the night. It would be the last night that Leroy would ever go to sleep. The following morning, on February 8, 1981, a lady found a backpack that appeared to have blood spatter on it. She turned the pack into police, who began to search the park, looking for anything suspicious. What the investigators found can only be described as horrific. The police found the deceased body of Leroy Carter Jr. still inside his sleeping pack. The scene was very gruesome. Mr. Carter had been decapitated and his head was missing. Whoever had taken the life of Leroy had taken 2 kernels of corn and the body of a decapitated chicken and stuffed them in his neck, where his head once was. The investigators knew that this mystery was not your run-of-the-mill murder that they were used to dealing with. They believed that due to the body missing its head and the odd items left at the scene, that they might be dealing with a ritualistic crime. The San Francisco Police Department had an officer by the name of Sandy Gallant that had intricate knowledge of the occult and the rituals that secluded cults practice. She had been one of the lead investigators of Jim Jones and the People's Temple in California. She had studied that cult and had garnered much knowledge regarding the ritualistic sacrifices and practices, so much so that her fellow officers had given her the nickname Colt Cop. Officer Sandy Gallant was brought in by the investigating officers to see if she could shed some light on the grisly crime scene. Gallant took in all of the evidence, and after speaking with individuals who have intricate knowledge of the occult, developed a theory that Leroy Carter Jr. had been the victim of ritualistic sacrifice. The theory that Sandy Gallant had constructed explained why Carter had been beheaded and why his head was taken from the scene. She stated that Carter had fallen victim to a black magic ritual carried out by followers of the African cult Palo Mayombe. This cult is an offshoot of the practice of Santeria, which combines many Haitian voodoo beliefs and their practices with the Western beliefs of Catholicism. The religion of Palo Mayombe differs from Santeria by adding more blood rites, black magic, and sometimes devil worship. She believed that the brain, and possibly nose and ears, had been used to make a special brew during a dark ritual. The following footage is from the YouTube channel Planet Doc, and it shows the basic steps leading up to a non-violent ritual from this cult.
Jacinto lives in Cuba and belongs to a secret sect called the Abacua. He is preparing for his initiation into Palo de Monte. This is the Cuban black magic of Bantu origin, imported by slaves brought here from Central Africa. In the scenario of the cult, there is a rudimentary altar called the prenda. This sacred place is filled with sacred earth, sticks, human bones, and other magical objects.
As was made obvious in the previous footage, even the most basic ritual that the cult is willing to show outsiders makes use of human bones. It is a fact that this group finds power in human remains when used in their rituals. Gallant coming to the conclusion that a practitioner of this dark religion could desecrate the body of Carter in one of the group's rituals is believable in my opinion. Not only did the cult cop come to the conclusion of ritualistic sacrifice, she told the lead investigators on the case that Mr. Carter's head would be brought back to the crime scene exactly 42 days after the crime. She would go on later to tell the LA Times, at the end of those 21 days, if the priest deemed it appropriate, he would actually sleep in an area with this head and with his cauldron for another 21-day period. Then on the 42nd day, he discards the head in close proximity to where he took it from. To him, that was a sacred way of returning the head. Gallant found herself in an odd place. She had been asked by her superiors in the San Francisco Police Department to give her expert opinion on the case, but those same investigators thought that her theory was ridiculous. Gallant would also go on to tell the LA Times, "We literally were laughed at by our homicide investigators and our chief of detectives. It was like, give me a break, this stuff doesn't happen." The investigators went about investigating the mystery of what happened to Leroy Carter just like any other homicide case that they had had before. Unfortunately, there was not much information to go on, and since they had decided to not pursue the possibility of the crime being a ritualistic sacrifice, they had very few theories as to why Carter had been attacked so viciously. As the investigation into this mystery gained little traction, the days began to pile up, and before the police had made any strides into the case, 6 weeks had passed. Gallant said that even though she and her partner had constructed their theory around ritualistic sacrifice and Mr. Carter's head being returned to the scene of the crime on the 42nd day, they still did not set up a lookout to watch the scene that day. She said that she had begun to think, much like her peers, that her theory was probably ridiculous, since that was all that she heard from her superiors and colleagues. Unfortunately, the lack of action kept the perpetrator of Leroy Carter Jr.'s death from being identified. Just as Gallant had predicted, Mr. Carter's decomposing head was returned on the 42nd day to the place where the crime was committed. Since there was no police presence watching the crime scene, the criminal got away. The San Francisco Police Department became quite silent regarding details of the crime committed against Leroy Carter after his head was found. The investigators would go on to remain silent on any leads that they had or that they were investigating at the time. Tragically, for Leroy Carter Jr. and his family, no one was ever arrested in regard to the mystery surrounding his death. It seems that the case was destined to be a cold case the moment the investigators laughed at the theory that Gallant postulated regarding the crime being a ritualistic sacrifice. Unfortunately, the facts being what they are in this mystery, Mr. Carter would probably never receive the justice that he rightfully deserves. Thank you for joining me today as we looked at this dark mystery. Please like, subscribe, share, and post a comment. Until the next one.